Hey everybody, welcome back to Dad Does Videos. Today what we're going to do is replace these light and fan switches with new, more modern versions from the Legrand Adorne collection. So this will be the new faceplate, and we'll put this paddle switch in here, and then we'll put these two kind of mini switches in to replace these. First step, as always, is to turn off the power to whatever room you're working on. We've already done that, but if you haven't done that already, go ahead and do that. Here are the tools that you'll need for this. We've got wire cutters, we've got our Phillips head screwdriver and a flathead. We've got some needle nose pliers, electrical tape, scissors, a level, and some 14 gauge wire that I'll show you how to use later to add a switch in there. So that's it for now. We'll get started with the first step. First step, not surprisingly, is to take this plate off. So you can see I need to remove them with a flathead screwdriver, so we're just gonna go ahead and do that, and you'll have your switches still left. Okay, as you can see, we have the plate off, and like I described in the previous step, you just have the three switches still. You'll notice they're each attached to the electrical box with a screw. So we are going to remove the screws next. Okay, so we've got our screws off, and most of the times these are going to be a little bit still attached to the wall because people typically paint over the side, so don't be worried about just kind of pulling them off. It's pretty typical, and you'll notice they're attached with all these wires, and you'll want to pay attention to which wires are attached to which, but you'll want to remove them just by using a screw to remove each wire. But pay attention, like I said, what's attached to which. The most challenging part is on this one, and if I can probably get a good view, you'll want to make sure that, I don't know if you can see, but there's a label on this one called common, and you'll want to make sure you remember which one that is. That's going to be important later when we put the new switches on. Okay, so we've got all of our switches off the wires, and this is what it looks like. You'll notice here, I kept these wires all off to the side in a bunch because they were attached, if you'll recall, to the one big switch on this side. And then on the other side, we had those two switches that were one on top of another, and I pushed these all off to the other side to make sure they all stick together. I wrapped some electrical tape around the common wire just to make sure we remember which one that is, because that's going to be important later that we hook that up the right way. This is also a good time after you remove the wires, and I already did it, to flatten out these the ends of the wires and trim them if you want. So for instance, this one, I'll need to trim back a little bit. There's so much copper coming out of this. I'll probably cut it back to about a 3/4 of an inch or so. And the way that I like to do that is to use your wire cutters here. Just put it in the slot that says 14 gauge, just cut off as much as you want with the end of these where it says wire cutter. Shockingly simple, right? And that's how you do that. Now, the way to flatten out these copper wires, if they're really curly, because a lot of these copper wires in older switches are attached around a screw, those screws that I pulled out. So I just like to flatten these out, and I already did it. But that's what these needle nose pliers are for. You just put them in there, mess them around, and then just flatten them out. And then you have really nice straight wires, which we'll need, as you'll see in some of the upcoming steps. After you've got all this sorted out the way you want it, the next step is to put the metal frame in the box. And the way you do that with the Adorne situations, we have these little tabs on the back. And all that you do is you slide a flathead screwdriver in there and just twist. And just do it a couple of these, and it'll just pop open like that. So what we'll do next is attach this to these using the 4 screw holes right there. Okay, just a few tips here as we go. You'll see that we've got our frame up, and this may sound a little goofy, but make sure it's right side up. You can see the Legrand brand right here. You're just going to make sure that's the case. just because you don't want it upside down or inside out or anything like that. The second thing here is to level everything. I already leveled this so it's straight, but it again sounds kind of silly, but oftentimes you'll walk into houses and see switches and outlets a little crooked on the wall. So it just takes a few seconds to just make sure it's level. And then the last thing here is you'll see our ground wire coming out here. And the next step, what we're going to do is attach this to each of the copper ground wires on each side, this one, and then this one over here. And it's just a little bit easier when you put this metal plate on just to grab this and pull it out so it's ready for the next step. So speaking of that next step, we'll talk about it right now. Again, what you'll want to do, and it came with the plate, but you'll want to grab your wire connector, and what you're going to do is wrap this together with the end of the green wire along with this one too. So they'll all be wrapped together, and you tighten it moving clockwise with this. And then you'll want to wrap that with some electrical tape. So here's what this should look like after you've done it. Like I mentioned, I attached the green wire to both of the ground wires from each side, connected it with our wire connector, and wrapped some electrical tape around it. And what you're going to want to do with that is just push this back in the box so it gets out of the way. Okay, so we're ready to put our first light switch on the left side, and here it is down here. I just flipped it over so you can see what great directions the Adorne folks give us. So what we're going to do is just follow what they have right here. It tells you exactly, this is a diagram of the back. So this equals this, these down here equal that. If you'll recall, we had two black wires that were connected to our previous switch. So we are going to put one right in there and the other right in there. And the way that you do that, these are really easy. There are little screws that hold the wire in place. So you loosen these a little bit, put the wire in, and then tighten these up, and that's it. So we'll go ahead and do that. So this is what your switch should look like after you've put in both wires. And again, it doesn't matter when you're doing a setup like this which black wire goes in which spot. You just pick one and put one on top and one on the bottom, and then make sure it tells you, I think you can see it right here, it says top, so you'll make sure this is facing up, and the little circles mean that's the part that should be on top. And all you do is just push this in. That wire's kind of getting in the way, but you just push this in. You can see the little tabs. I'll have to fix this when I can use my other hand, but you just push this in until it snaps. Okay, so this is when we get to a little bit to the tricky part of this installation. If you remember before, we had these three wires here and the ground wire, and they were connected to one light switch that had two switches attached to it. So all of these connected to one device. But now we're putting in two of these kind of mini switches, and they're separate. So it doesn't tell you this in the directions. I had to contact Legrand separately to figure out how to do this, because guess what? I'm not an electrician. But remember before when we talked about how important labeling this common wire is? It's also called the hot wire. That's the wire that supplies power to your switches. So at the bottom of this device, you can see the word hot there. So what we're going to do is put this hot wire into this hole on the switch. And it does tell us this in the directions. Common, hot goes in the bottom right. So we'll put that right in there. And what we'll also do is attach our red wire. Then this is the wire that supplies light to our fan up here. And we'll put this in this hole up top here, where let's see what that says. That way, we'll be using, when this is in, we'll be using this switch to control the lights, and we'll use the other one to control the fan. So we'll get that set up, and then I'll tell you about the next step, and that's where you'll start to use your 14 gauge wire to jump from this switch to the next switch over. Okay, so we've got our first mini switch set up. You can see the wires are connected as I described. The challenge here comes with supplying power to the other one of these that's going to go up and down right here. This black wire controls the fan, whether you want it on or off. But he can't get the fan to go on without power to it. And we don't have another common or hot wire coming in because it's just this black one. So what we're going to do is, if you look at the back of this, we are going to cut off some 14 gauge wire and put one end into the other hole on that hot slot and run it to the other switch that will be here, that slot in the, where it says hot in the other one. So this is when you'll need to get your 14 gauge wire and just cut off as much as you need. So I'm not going to cut that much. It'll probably be something like this. And then take the black wire out. So here's a piece of wire that I just cut off, and I just used scissors. You can see them right here. I just cut that off from here, and then you can kind of separate these a little bit and just pull the black one out. And what I'll do is I'll use my wire strippers right here and use the 14 gauge slot and just pull a little of the casing off each side so that it can slide into each of those slots on each of the switches. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the second switch connected to the first. So we ran that piece of black wire from the other side of the hot slots, basically, into the bottom and put it in one of the holes on the right to the other switch's hot slot, and then plugged in the fan to the one pole slot on the other one. And now, just like we did with this switch, we turn around and push these in, making sure the holes are at the top. And after that, I'll show you how to put the cover on. Okay, one of the last steps, remember that you took this frame or the front cover of the frame off earlier, so now we're just gonna put it on. As you can see, we've got all of our switches in, everything's tightened up, everything's leveled. So all you do is put that over top, push all the different sides down, you can hear them all click, and there we go. Nice new fresh look. We'll turn the power on, come back upstairs, make sure everything works the right way, and we'll call it a success. Okay, so we switched the power back on. We can't really test this first switch because it turns an outlet on and off that's really not in use right now. We're gonna assume that's okay, which probably isn't the best idea in the world, but I've done multiple ones of these in the past and I've never had an issue. So we'll try the second switch. Hey, we've got light. And then we'll try the next switch. And hey, we've got fan. So it looks like a success. Hope yours goes well too. Bye now.